Hi pilots, welcome to another episode of From the Forum, where we jump into the Where to Fly forum, see what people are talking about, comment on it, and I just kind of respond to the general drone chat in our community. So in this episode, we're going to be doing things a little differently, trying out a podcast style format. Before we've done YouTube videos, this will still be on YouTube, but in a podcast style. If you like it, if you don't like it, let me know. Leave a comment down below. But anyway, without further ado, let's just jump right into this week's topic, and that is flying beyond line of sight. So Sam posted this comment a little while back. He said, I was wondering how many of you guys feel like flying beyond line of sight is safe and the law is ridiculous. And there are quite a few comments. So I'll kind of read through the comments, and then I'll go into my opinions and my thoughts. So Robert responded by saying, I don't have a problem with flying beyond line of sight if it's over a field or somebody's watching the drone, i.e. a spotter. It's a bit different than flying in populated areas, in my opinion. Robert, I couldn't agree more with you, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Another member, Danielle, actually said, I think flying beyond line of sight is safe as long as you take certain precautions, like not flying over busy areas and making sure that you don't get close to going out of range. The regulations make sense if you are talking about some person with money that goes out and buys a Phantom and decides to test the range of it for fun. But those people are not likely to listen to the regulations anyway. It's a good point. I think that there should be restrictions on long-range FPV flight, though. For instance, don't fly through cities, urban areas, because there's a lot of interference to cause signal loss, and lots of people and property damage could happen if you crash. So those were kind of the comments, and that got me thinking, what are my thoughts on flying beyond line of sight and my actual practices? How do I fly beyond line of sight? So I kind of want to address that. So I guess the first thing I want to say, laying kind of a groundwork, is flying beyond line of sight legal? And the answer to that is, in the United States, it is not legal. Flying beyond line of sight is something you are not allowed to do by the FAA's regulations. Now, what is flying beyond line of sight? And can you have a spotter who's watching the drone with like binoculars, and is that considered flying within line of sight? Some people would say yes, others would say no. I don't think it's in the spirit of the law, but I guess if you have, eye contact with the drone, in my book, that seems like it's line of sight. But here's kind of what's more interesting to me would be basically what all these different members of the forum were talking about, and that is where you're flying, how you're flying your drone, if you're being responsible. Just as, here, I'm going to give kind of an example. If you're jaywalking and you cross the street, yeah, that's illegal, but I would argue that a lot of people probably do it. If you're, flying your drone beyond line of sight, that's also legal, but I would argue a lot of people do it. Are they the same? No, not really. But my point is, just because it's technically not legal doesn't necessarily mean lots of people don't do it and don't do it all the time. So if you're going to fly beyond line of sight, which I'm not necessarily recommending, but say you're going to anyway, here are my thoughts. Okay, I think that if you're going to be flying beyond line of sight, it can't be in a populated area. I think, actually, you can't ever fly over a populated area, and I think that's something that, almost everyone would agree on. Just flying over people, one, is illegal, and two, is just, not nice to the people underneath you. It's kind of annoying when there's a drone flying above you. And kind of talking about the legalities of it, I've heard quite a few instances of people kind of getting in trouble with the law, or at least getting kind of told off by park rangers, police officers, the FAA, about flying over people. And from my research and from what I've read and heard, I haven't heard anybody specifically for getting in trouble for just flying beyond line of sight. And so for me, that's a lot more important than flying beyond line of sight. That would be flying over people, a populated area. So again, if you're not flying over a populated area, what else is important in my opinion? Well, you have to be abiding by the other FAA, regulations and rules, and that includes, your flight ceiling. I believe that's at 400 feet. You can't go above that, and also making sure you are not flying within 3 to 5 miles of an airport, and if you are giving notice to the airport and asking for permission to fly, you can do this actually on the Where to Fly app on the no-fly zones, which is powered by Air Maps, or you can go directly to AirMap, or you can go on the FAA's website. There's plenty of resources for you as a drone pilot to see if where you're flying is near an airport, and if it is near an airport, to contact the airport and ask for permission. So those two things are important. And then finally, I would say making sure that your drone's in good condition, making sure you have battery, making sure the drone return to home is working, making sure your altitude for the return to home is something reasonable. If there's trees in your area, so you're not going to crash your drone, that's more for your drone's safety. But what it comes down to, in my opinion, is if you're flying in the desert, if you're flying in the middle of, the California Valley, agricultural, an agricultural location where there's farmlands and fields, and if your drone falls, worst case scenario, you lose your drone. For me, flying beyond line of sight in that situation really is not such a big deal, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. Where it is a big deal is, like, for example, I love Casey Neistat, but he flies his drones so irresponsibly in San Francisco, and he actually got in trouble with the FAA for doing that. In my book, that's the reason that I think drones can kind of possibly get some really stringent regulations, because when you start flying over people, you lose signal, you crash into a building, like was said in the forum. That's when you start getting into issues that I think are a lot more dangerous and a lot more potentially harmful, rather than flying over farmland where the worst thing is it falls on the ground. Falling on someone's head with a drone, well, highly unlikely, would be very bad. So those are just kind of my thoughts on flying beyond line of sight. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think it should be legal? Do you think it should be illegal? Do you think there should be a test to be able to fly line of sight? That we kind of talked about that on the forum, and I think the consensus was it's hard to really judge if somebody from an online test or something would be qualified. But what do you think the solution is? Do you think there could be certain areas where you're allowed to fly beyond line of sight, or should it just be illegal altogether? I'd love to hear your feedback. Please leave it in the comments down below. As I wrap up here, I just want to mention that I'm launching a Patreon page to support the Where to Fly app. I launched this app, I think it was over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. It's a passion project for me. I love working on it, but it cost me a lot of money. There's generous donations that I used at the beginning to help fund the development of the app, and as that money is starting to reach the end of its lifespan, I'm looking for ways to keep the app alive and running. So if you would like to donate, if you would like to contribute to the app and get some perks along with it, like beta testing, giving feedback to me, being able to fill out forums, and influence the design of the app, check out the Patreon page. You also get access to all of the podcast videos, blogs, 24 hours before everyone else does. If that's something that interests you, check it out. Feel free to contribute and keep this app running. If not, I'll do my best to keep this app alive regardless. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.